The NTSB preliminary report on Twin Cessna November 86 Hotel is out, and I'm very interested in this report because 86 Hotel is a 1960 model Cessna 310, just 1 year newer than Harvey, my 1959 Cessna Model 310. Initially, it was reported that this pilot was doing a series of touch and goes at Coeur d'Alene Airport, but that appears to not be the case. Here in the preliminary report, it indicates some sort of an engine problem. But first, I want to take you inside the 310 and show you inside the cockpit and the throttle quadrant setup. Here's the throttle quadrant in the Cessna 310. You got your throttles, props, and mixtures right there. And you've got a friction knob that you can tighten and loosen right here on the side of the quadrant. And the first thing in any engine failure situation to do is make sure everything is forward and then sort out your engine problem. And over here's your manifold pressure gauge, RPM, fuel flow, oil temperatures and pressure and cylinder head temperatures, and main tank fuel quantity. Remember, the main tanks in the early Model 310s are the 50-gallon tuna tanks located on the wing tips that are designed to break away in the event of a crash to minimize the risk of fire, which appears to be the case in this crash. So instead of having two separate engine gauges for the manifold attack and fuel pressure, they've got a single gauge but with two needles. There's the number 2 engine on top, and the number 1 engine needle is lying underneath. A couple of points about owning and operating these older Cessnas or any of these older twins. First off, you can get into these twins pretty cheap, like around $50,000 or $60,000, and that's a lot of airplane, 200-mile-an-hour airplane for very little money. But the care, maintenance, and feeding of these things is enormous. I plan on every year budgeting about $12,000 for the annual inspection on this airplane. And if anything's wrong with this, that number can easily be doubled. The reason I bought this particular Cessna 310 is because I knew its maintenance history. I knew the previous owner and its maintenance history for the last nearly 50 years. This aircraft was based right here at Nevada County Airport and maintained by the very same shop that maintains this aircraft today. A lot of these aircraft get a whole bunch of different owners because it eats you out of house and home, and the owner quickly realizes, yeah, it was cheap to buy, but very expensive to maintain, and sells it. And sometimes because it's so cheap to buy, the new owners of these aircraft go cheap on the maintenance as well. And besides, they figure they got 2 engines. It'll be all right. But that's not the case. Here's the preliminary report recently released by the NTSB. On November 13th, 2023, about 8 in the morning, a Cessna 310D, that's the 1960 model, November 86 Hotel, was substantially damaged when it was involved in an accident near Hayden, Idaho. The pilot sustained minor injuries. The airplane was operated as Title 14 code, I think they meant to say Part 91, General Aviation Personal Flight. The pilot reported that after he had departed Coeur d'Alene Airport, COE Hayden, with an intended destination of Nampa, Idaho, as he ascended to about 4,500 feet mean sea level, so that would have been only about 2,000 feet above the ground, he noticed the manifold pressure on the left engine indicated about 21 inches, while the manifold pressure for the right engine indicated 23 inches. Well, oftentimes those throttles will creep on you if you don't have your hands up there on the throttles at all times. Despite his efforts to troubleshoot the difference in manifold pressure of the 2 engines, so he tried to work with it, he was unsuccessful and noted that the left engine seemed to be unresponsive. So did a cable come unattached? A throttle cable? The pilot decided to return to Coeur d'Alene, and while on final approach to runway 2, let's take a look at that for a second. Here's the airport diagram for Coeur d'Alene. He's electing to return on runway 2, the shorter of the 2 runways, 5,400 foot of runway versus 7,400 feet of runway. Not sure what the winds were at the time of the accident. Let's see if it's in the report. Yeah, winds only 3 knots out of the north. The pilot decided to return to Coeur d'Alene, and while on final approach to runway 2, the left engine either went to idle or lost all power, followed by the sound of the stall warning horn, and the airplane immediately rolled to the left and impacted the ground short of runway 2. Post-accident examination of the airplane by the FAA revealed that the airplane impacted the ground about 250 feet before the approach end of runway 2. The fuselage and the wings were substantially damaged, and both engines were separated from the engine nacelles. Interesting. So was the throttle stuck on that number 1 engine, and as a result, he was coming in relying on the power of the number 1 engine and had the number 2 engine back at idle, and then when the number 1 engine cut loose, he didn't have time to get the power back up on the number 1 engine? Anytime you have an engine problem in a multi-engine airplane, even if you're returning for a precautionary landing, you've got some kind of problem with the engine, you still want to set up and plan and do a single engine approach and landing. And here's the book for the 1959, my Cessna 310, single engine landing. Approach at 105 miles an hour with excess altitude. The basic premise of a single engine landing is you want to come in with a little extra energy than you would on a normal landing. 2, delay extension of the landing gear until within gliding distance of the field. 3, avoid the use of flaps until landing is assured. And 4, decrease speed below 95 miles per hour only if landing is certain. So all of these precautions or all these setups for the single engine approach will give you enough energy to avoid stalling the aircraft on one engine. And then they warn you about the difficulty of a single engine go-around on one of these light twins, and they do want you here in step 5 to land with some excess speed to allow for gusts or poor technique. And then 6, remind you that it's going to be very hard to taxi on one engine once you get ready to clear the runway. And here's what I was saying back in the hangar, where engine failure during flight, the first thing you want to do is get everything forward and then begin to sort out your engine problem. Now this happened on very short final to land. So this case study presents an interesting conundrum. If you've got an engine that's stuck at 21 inches of manifold pressure and it's unresponsive, you cannot control that engine on a twin engine airplane. Do you want to continue to fly with that one engine, keep it operating all the way into the landing? Or would it be better to shut that one engine down and just do a normal single engine landing with the remaining good engine, which you have full control over? Thank you so much for your support of this channel, which in turn helps pay for the care and feeding of this classic aircraft, and especially to the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.